friends, welcome to the long-awaited video where I will tell you about my language school, all the pros and cons, and what language school I chose in the end. Before I do that, I feel like I have to give a disclaimer that everything I say today is my experience. I'm not here to put down the school or to badmouth them or to tell you to not go. I also ask a lot of my classmates, but also people from the other class, to do a little anketto, so a little form that I will also talk about later in the video. So if you want to hear other people's opinions as well, stick around. And don't mind me looking down. I have a lot of notes because I cannot remember everything, and I want to talk about everything with as much detail as possible. So now that I can finally tell you which school I went to, let's do a little drum roll. And I went to Yokohama Design College. So yeah, I went to the school in Yokohama that I actually put into my top 3 schools, I think, in my Let's Look at Language School videos. And I didn't want to talk in too much detail about the school in my vlogs because even just me complaining in the first vlog about the low tables, someone figured out to what school I must be going, so I didn't want any more people to figure that out. And also sorry to the person who commented that. I tried to give the impression I'm not going to that school just to prevent people from knowing where I frequent every day. There were 2 main reasons that I chose the school. First of all, it's in Yokohama, and it was the only school in Yokohama that Gogo Nihon offered, at least in the medium intensity range. And originally I thought about going to Tokyo because a lot of people that I know from online are living in Tokyo, but also Tokyo is a very big and busy and also kind of expensive city. So I felt for myself it would be better to move close to Tokyo, but not too close, if you know what I mean. So I didn't want to be in the center of all the cars and people and stuff. So I feel like here in Yokohama I have a better balance of quietness and also being close to more popular areas. And the second reason why I chose the school is because it's an art senmongakko, so an art college, and they also have the Japanese language school part, of course. And the main thing that convinced me to go was that they have free art classes, and they also have the open classes where you can participate in art classes also with Japanese students together. So I thought this was very interesting. And originally when I applied to the school, I thought I would not have a job in Japan, and I didn't want to get a job in Japan, and that I would have all the free time in the world. So I was like, oh yeah, I want to go to language school, and then I want to do all the extracurricular activities and join the art classes and stuff. But I got the new job before I left, and I really loved the job, so I took it with me. So I worked 28 hours a week in that job and also went to school for 20 hours a week. So there was no time to do any extracurricular things. So actually one of the reasons why I chose the school kind of lost the meaning, but still I'm happy that I chose the school, I would say, because of the people I met. So let's talk about all the things I liked and didn't like about the school. And I wasn't sure how to properly structure it. I realized a lot of positive things also came with negative things at the same time. So I categorized it into facilities and location, general things, teachers and lessons, and also how I feel now after attending language school and what other people think. So let's start with facilities and location. A thing I really liked was that the common space for the students has 2 microwaves and also a tiny balcony, and they also have 2 vending machines, and usually the prices are cheaper than even the cheapest machines outside, which is especially nice if you don't have a lot of money. However, the common space was way too small. They only had 4 or 5 tables with I think like 4 or 5 seats each. So at the maximum 25 seats, and we are quite a lot of classes. I think we are 200 language school students maybe, or even more. I'm not quite sure because we are split into morning and afternoon class, but there are a lot of people, and most of the time everyone's just standing around and you can't even get through to the balcony or something because you just have to squeeze through all the people standing there and waiting. So it's not that handy. And also they have a library, which is of course nice, and you can also read a lot of manga or books in Japanese there, but the books are not allowed to leave the library, so you cannot rent them. And there are only, I think, 8 to 10 seating spaces in the library, and they are also mostly full usually, so it's hard if you want to stay in school after the classes, for example, and study in the library. And also because the library is very close to the common space and there's only a sliding door, which oftentimes does not stay closed. It's very loud and you can't really concentrate. If you go there, for example, after morning class and then want to, I don't know, study for 1 hour or something, because there are 40 minutes of lunch break, it's so loud. And even after the afternoon classes start, sometimes it's still quite loud. Especially from October to December, I felt like it was extremely loud. Maybe because everyone was still new and people had a lot to talk about, but I felt like January to March was a bit quieter, so it was a bit easier to handle, especially because teachers leave the door open, so you also hear people in the common space while doing classes, which is great. And then also there is Wi-Fi, even though on the Gogo Nihon website, when I looked, it said they don't have Wi-Fi. However, the Wi-Fi doesn't work half of the time, so maybe that's why it wasn't written there. So have enough mobile data if you attend the school. When it comes to the classrooms, there's hardly any space to put your belongings. There's nothing to put your jacket or your bag, except for if you sit next to the window, then there's a big windowsill where you can just put your bag on top. In Germany, usually there's a little hook at the side of the table where you just hang your bag and it's like in the walkway area between the tables. But this didn't work because the walkway was way too tight, so it was very annoying. And also, like I said before, the tables are way too small. I'm 180. I think that's 6 foot. I will put that at the top. So I'm tall and I have long legs. My legs didn't really fit under the table if I wanted to sit with my knees being 90 degrees. So I always had to stretch out my legs to sit or like fold them away under the chair. It wasn't very comfortable. And after a few weeks of not really feeling comfortable, I just scooted back with my chair and I didn't sit under the table. I sat behind the table and then I would lean onto the table to write. But yeah, it was not ideal. And we also had one guy in our class that was at least 2 meters and I felt so sorry for him. And I don't understand when you have international students why you don't have higher tables, and especially because when we had our listening exam for the Kimatsu Shiken, as you saw in my last vlog, we went onto the 3rd floor because usually we're on the 2nd floor, and there they have tall tables. And this is the floor where the Japanese people study. Why would you use tall tables for Japanese people that are usually a bit smaller and then give the foreigners the smaller table that are usually a bit taller? But yeah, apparently they have tall tables, just not for us. And then when it comes to the location, there's a Lawson right around the corner, so it only takes 1 minute to get there. So even in the 10-minute breaks between the lessons, you can just go to Lawson, grab something, still have time to go to the bathroom and then maybe eat for 2 minutes. So it's very handy. And also it's only 1 station away from Yokohama main station with the Futsu Densha, so the normal train. And you can also walk to Minato Mirai, which is a very popular shopping area. It only takes 15 minutes to walk there. And apparently to Yokohama station, it's supposed to take like 20-ish minutes, so it's not too bad. The only thing that's not as handy is that at Toba Station, which is the train station that's nearest to the school, there's only the normal train. So all the fast trains, they just pass by. I always have to take the very slow train that takes 2-3 times the time it would take with the fast train. So that was sometimes a little bit annoying because it felt like a waste of time because I could have gotten there faster technically. But yeah, it's just a minor inconvenience. Then general things. One thing that I really liked was the wide variety of nationalities when it comes to the students. For example, Suzu, she went to Akamonkai and she said the amount of Chinese students being there was very, very high and that the class was therefore mostly catered to Chinese people. But in my school, I think they had like a specific class for Chinese people, so they would go a bit faster. But they also had like more international classes and we had a lot of different nationalities. Some people from Europe, but also from a lot of other Asian countries. And it was so nice to have all this input, all the different cultures, and everyone was so friendly and open. Like this was the universal thing, even though everyone came from another culture. Everyone was super friendly and nice and wanted to hang out and talk to you. So I really enjoyed being in the class when it comes to all my classmates. There was no one who was ever mean. Sometimes, of course, the guys would make some jokes, like regarding some of the girls or also regarding me, because I'm German, and I think I'm the person in the class who came from the coldest country. So I would always rip open the windows because the air was very bad. And every day I would come into the class in winter. Some of the guys would be like, oh, atsui desu ne. But I enjoyed, like the little banter. And also age-wise, I was a bit concerned before going to the school because I'm 27, and usually I thought people would maybe go to language school on their year abroad after school. So I was a bit afraid I would be the oldest one and I wouldn't find people to connect with in my class. But actually there were at least 2 people that were older than me and 1 girl also my age. So it was better than expected. My seating neighbor was 17, so we had a very wide range of ages, but I felt like most people were in their early 20s. And I was also very happy that I was the only German person in my class. And also I feel like in my school, I know there was someone from Switzerland, but we still talked in English. I felt like even though I'm okay with speaking English, still my conversational abilities improved, because usually I'm talking to the camera, so I don't really have a real conversation. Sometimes I was unsure what to answer when someone would just randomly approach me, like the little filler words and stuff. But now I feel very, very confident. This also was nice, even though I didn't come to school to learn English, but still my English improved as well. And then being together with people who also wanted to learn Japanese was very nice, because at home I don't have a lot of people who are into the same thing as I am. Feeling like everyone had the same interest, and at least you have one thing in common with everyone because you're in Japan because you want to be there and learn Japanese. Maybe that's also why everyone got along so well, because we knew everyone has the same love for Japan. And then there were also a lot of activities offered that you could do after school. For example, there was a basketball club, a volleyball club, the school band, the art class, cosplay club, and also a chorus where you sing. I never know how to pronounce that word, I'm sorry. Lots of opportunities to have fun and make friends. I didn't attend any of them, as I said, because I was too busy, which was very sad, because I really wanted to learn to play the drums, and I could have done that in the school band, but there was no time for me to make it work, unfortunately. But one thing that I heard from my friends who attended art class was that they were very disappointed, and I would have been disappointed as well if I attended, I feel like, because if you hear art class, you think about a class where you learn things. Essentially, it was an open space where you could bring your own art project, and then you could ask the teacher a question if you wanted some feedback or a tip, but that's it. So it's more like a common workspace with certain hours where you can visit. And then there were also opportunities like teaching English at the Japanese elementary school, which I attended. But it was a bit strange because I was unofficially invited by my class teacher, but no one else was invited from my class. There were only people from other classes who went. So maybe it was because I was the new person, and we got paid, I think, 5,000 yen for around 4 or 5 hours of being there. The only drawback was that we had to get up at 5:15 or something, and because the school was quite far away, and even though I kind of criticized the art class, I still liked that we were part of a creative school, because there were a lot of art projects hanging in the school, like in the hallway, and you would always see art if you would walk past. And then there were also 2 school festivals, which is the Shiokazesai in November, and then there was in February the graduation exhibition. So we had to attend, but we also got an extra day free because we had to attend on the weekend to make up for it. But it was very interesting, at least the first time. The second time was kind of not as interesting because they didn't have a program or something. When I went to the Shiokazesai for the first time, it was so nice because they had a fashion show, they had the cosplay show where they danced wearing cosplays and kind of performed to songs, and then they also had a concert. They had 3 stories of art that you could just, walk around and look at, and it was very fun. And I was still in my honeymoon phase with the school when I attended, and it made me very emotional watching the fashion show and being like, oh my god, I'm attending school with so many talented people, and even though I can't attend anything related to art, I'm very happy. And then we also had the open classes. So there were 2 classes in January where we had to attend school, and we had to choose 3 classes from a catalog, and then the school would decide which class we would be assigned to. And I got assigned to my 3rd choice, unfortunately, because one was about designing line stickers, one was about drawing drawing expressions, and both of them I wanted to do. And then the third one was making a sun catcher, which I thought like, oh yeah, I always wanted, you know, like a little sun catcher in my room, so the light gets, you know, like reflected in a lot of different colors and things. But you had to pay for the third thing that I chose, and it was only 500 yen, but still, we paid like over 3,000 euros of school fees. I thought like, surely there are 500 yen left that they could have used. I wasn't that happy about it, but then I thought like, oh, but at least I have a nice pretty sun catcher. And then I came to the class and I was not very happy with the design, because when I imagine a sun catcher, I will put a picture here, what I think about. What we made was very different. Let me show you. So that's the thing that we did. So it's a plastic thing and rhinestones. And I mean, it kind of looks okay, better than I expected, especially when I saw the example piece. But still, I don't really like it. I tried to use it, but it doesn't work. There's no effect in the room, which kind of defeats the purpose of a sun catcher, in my opinion at least. I was a bit disappointed, and since the open classes are held every 6 months, my classmates who attended school before me, they already did one open class before me, and I asked them which ones they liked, which ones they didn't like, and most of them were like, well, I wasn't really a big fan of the one that I chose. And again, it was about you are there, you have your project, you're doing the project, that's it. But there's no one really teaching you things. For example, with drawing the line stamps, one of my classmates did it, and she said they were just like, yeah, here, that's what we're gonna do it. But there were no explanation. For example, if you do it digitally, those are good brushes to use, those are the color palettes I would recommend or something, which would have only taken 5 minutes to explain. And also for our thing, we got a printout where everything was described, and then it was like, yeah, read the printout and do it. Even though our teacher was very nice and we laughed quite a lot with her, there was no real teaching again. And then there were also events like the Christmas party, which was interesting because every class had to perform. We weren't asked if we wanted to do it, we had to. So we had to choose between singing, dancing, or acting, or doing a film. So our class split into 3 groups and we did 2 songs, which were the Doraemon theme song, then the Japanese version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and then the third one was a dance for the Ojo-sama It's Time to Go to Bed viral TikTok thingy. I don't have TikTok, so I didn't know it before, but it was very fun. And I thought first they wanted to sing the Ojo-sama song, so I was like, no, I'm not gonna sing that. I will sing the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer because at least I know the melody. But then it turned out they did the dance for the Ojo-sama, and then I was very sad I didn't took the dance because I like to dance. I danced a lot when I was a teenager, but at least I was able to watch the dance because I didn't took part, and it was very fun. And especially seeing some of my male classmates dancing as like the butler was very fun, and they were surprisingly very good. So in the end, it was kind of fun doing it, but I didn't like how we were forced to do stuff and there wasn't a lot of communication from our class teacher. We didn't really have time to practice a lot. And then she decided, I think the day before, randomly, yeah, let's all meet before class and practice. But of course I had to work, so I couldn't attend, and it was just, again, a very short notice. And then also we went to the aquarium, or at least my class went. I didn't go because I didn't want to see fish in captivity. But then there was also the museum thing where we went to a Japanese cultural museum with other classes, and it was so stressful because we went there during our normal class time. So we met at school, then we went there via the subway, which took, I think, like almost an hour to go to the museum. And then we were walked around by some of the staff, and then they explained a few of the exhibitions in Japanese, and we had the task to teach what we heard to the lower classes who didn't understand what they said. But the problem was we didn't understand it as well because it was way too complicated. And we didn't really know any historical vocabulary. And just the day before, our teacher did like a speed run of the Japanese history in like 15 minutes. It was way too fast. I couldn't even take notes from all of that because it was just so rushed. So this didn't really work. And then when we went inside the museum, we still had to teach our lower classmates. We were assigned to groups. I think we were 3 people of my class and then 2 people of the lower class that were in my group. And then we got an A4 sheet where we had to fill in 2 sides and we had to write something about every historical period in Japanese, of course. And of course we had to read what was written like on on the flags and stuff, but it was too complicated. And then we also had to do an anketo, so like a Google form where they asked, what is this called? What is this called? And they would like put some pictures there and we had to search for it and then put the name and we had to submit it. So we basically had 3 tasks to do at the same time. Teach, fill out the paper sheet, fill out the online thing, and we had 30 minutes for the whole inside of the museum. So it was very stressful. And my classmate and I, we decided, okay, we're gonna do the cheat and we're gonna do the anketo because that's what we have to hand in. So we don't want to hand in a blank piece of paper and get screamed at. And then we still got screamed at for doing the sheet because one of my classmates went away with the 2 people from the lower class to look at another part of the museum, which was very close. And then our teacher saw that we weren't in the group because we wanted to do the tasks we got assigned properly. And still there was one other person from my class with the people from the lower Japanese level class. So we thought it would be fine. But yeah, we got screamed at that we are supposed to be with the other students and that we don't do our tasks, even though we did. We tried our best to do the task. It was so stressful. And yeah, I didn't enjoy it at all. And then we had to leave the museum and we went out of the museum at 4:40, which is our usual time where we end the classes. And we were still at the museum and they didn't tell us before because a lot of people have jobs after class, including me. I had a meeting at 6 and as I told you, it takes 1 hour to go to school and I also have to take like 30 to 45 minutes to go home from school. And I didn't have enough time. I didn't have the opportunity to let my manager know before I wasn't able to attend the meeting or I would be late, which is so annoying because I will talk about this later, but it showed again they didn't value our time or our other commitments because school is the most important thing and nothing else matters, which is a very idealistic way to think and it's not very realistic, but I would have been way too late to my work if it wouldn't have been cancelled because someone else got sick as well. So it was not not the best experience, which brings us to more things I didn't like about general things. And one thing I hated the most was organization. I felt like the school was not very well organized and also our class teacher was not very well organized, even though they tried. Like we got, for example, the school schedule for the whole 6 months, but then they would change almost everything on the schedule except for the 2 festivals because that's also what they promoted to the outside, so they couldn't change that. Even our term final exam was changed 3 days before it was supposed to take place. And then there was also often a lack of communication. Our class teacher, I don't know, she always expected us to know things and to know what she wants from us, but she wouldn't really communicate what she wants from us and we can't read minds. So it would always result in her being angry that we didn't do what she wanted, but she didn't say what she wanted. Then a few students got placed into a way too high class, which was strange because when I had the open class, I had the opportunity to talk to other people from other classes and I asked them, hey, how you like school and how do you like the Tobida textbook? Because at that point I still thought we would be using the Tobida textbook soon and I wanted to know their opinion. And they said, well, I would like the book probably if I would be able to understand the book because they had the Japanese ability of N5 level and N4 level and they were placed into an N3 to N2 level class, which doesn't make sense, of course. I didn't understand it because why would you put an N5 person into that class, but me as someone who studied N3 in Germany into a class that starts with N3 that is too low, kind of, because it would have made more sense to put me into the N3, N2 class and put the N5 or like N4 person at least in the N3 class. That's not that hard yet. And those 2 people also said that their class was basically a catch-all class for people who didn't belong to any of the classes and was just a mess of a lot of different Japanese abilities. And it was very hard to have, of course, a class that everyone can understand. One of the 2 wanted to change class because he said it doesn't make any sense for him, obviously, because he doesn't understand anything, he has to pay a lot of money, he's wasting his time. And they were like, well, you could try another class, but we would not recommend that. And they would kind of insinuate we don't want you to change class multiple times, which also a lot of my classmates experienced because there were a lot of people who wanted to change out of my class because of our teacher. But every time they requested something, the school would be like, no, you have to stay in your class. And it didn't feel very nice to know people have problems. People don't really learn a lot, and they are not allowed to change into a class that fits their needs, especially because our class was lower and we had 1 free seat. No, we even had 2 free seats. So the 2 could have changed into my class and had at least the start of N3, which would have been maybe better for the N4 person. So yeah, I don't know why they didn't do that. And then, as I said before, they didn't respect our time, for example with the history museum thing. Then also we had a speech contest for the higher classes and we had to attend, and 2 days before they told us, well, you have to be there earlier than usual and you have to stay longer than usual. And they rented a hall, which of course they probably wouldn't have rented only 2 days before, and so they probably must have known that before, that there will be the speech contest, we have to attend. They could have just told us earlier, because again, a lot of people have jobs, and I don't think your boss will be very pleased if you say 2 days before, I'm sorry, I can't come to work in 2 days because my school wants me to be somewhere, or I have to be 2 hours late or something. Fortunately, I didn't have the problem because my work is very flexible and I can push my work hours like wherever I want them to be, except for meetings. So it wasn't really a problem for me, but a lot of other people had problems with that. And again, it showed the lack of respect towards us as students, which I felt a lot of times during my time in school, and especially as an adult, it really sucked. Then there were at least 5 other times where we had to come to school at 11:30 or 11 for only 10 minutes to do an interview or something with a teacher, and then it was like, yeah, now you have to wait until 1:10 until class starts. And as I told you, I live quite far from school, so it takes me 45 minutes from my home to the school. So I couldn't go home in that time and work, and I also couldn't take my PC because it's not the best PC, like my work PC. It's a bit old and I'm afraid to break it. So I just had to sit there and had to feel like I wasted valuable work time. We also had to stay longer in school for at least 3 or 4 times, and especially in January and February, like most of the things were in January and February, which was so annoying because it was in such a short time, and I felt like every week we just had to stay longer or come earlier, or you know, they always wanted us to be there outside of our usual hours, which was so frustrating. And once we were also given homework that we had to do within 6 hours because, as I said, our class ended at 4:40 and they told us you have to submit it by midnight. And I think it took like half an hour. We had to do like the matome task in the try book for 1 chapter and we had to submit it in a Google form. So this was stressful for some people because some people go to work right after school and then they work until midnight or until, you know, like 11:30 or something, and then they go home. It's midnight, it's already too late to do the homework, so when are they supposed to do that? And then of course, when we don't hand in their homework on time, we get scolded. When you watched my last video about the exams, you also heard me rant a lot about different things, and I don't know if it's because of bad organization or just not caring or not respecting us. They had repairs inside the school for the term final exam week for 3 days, and from Monday to Wednesday we hear the repairs. So annoying. So this meant Monday and Tuesday. In all 5 exams almost we hear the repairs, the drilling, the banging against the pipes, and it was just so frustrating because in the time I visited school they never had repairs, but now they need to do them in the week of all the exams, and they just couldn't have done that maybe an hour later. And then another big thing was privacy. They did not value our privacy at all. We had to write some essays, and 2 out of 3 times when we had to write the essays, my essay was printed and handed out to everyone in my class, which I did not agree to. No one asked me if that's okay. And I'm happy I didn't write about too personal things, because first I was like, oh, maybe I should, you know, put in more of my emotions because then it's more memorable to me, how I use the grammar and stuff. But then I was like, maybe not. If the teacher reads it, it's okay, but you know, I don't want other people to read it. And then everyone has my sakebun now at home. And then there were teachers taking pictures from our entrance ceremony, and they were posted on my school's Instagram profile. They had a lot of pictures where a lot of people were visible, so I feel like those pictures are not as bad and okay. But then they also posted pictures from my friends where there were just 4 people on the picture and you could see everyone clearly, and they just posted them without even asking them. And I feel like Japan being so concerned about privacy, you know, a lot of people don't have their face as their profile picture. It makes even less sense to me that they would just violate those rights. And then another time we had to write about something that we regret in our textbook, and we had to hand the textbook to our teacher. So she had a stack of textbooks, but in every textbook on the first page we had to write our name. In every textbook we owned. So she just could have looked at the name. But But instead, she decided to read. Who's the one that regretted not doing? Who's the one that's ashamed of having done blah blah blah? And I was just like, why are you reading that? The topic is a bit personal. So why are you reading that to the whole class to identify who gave you the book instead of looking at the name? I think it was just careless and not a bad intent, because the teacher was usually very nice and friendly. And then we come to teachers and lessons, which is the longest part. And I mean, I talked a lot already, but now we're coming to the annoying parts. So, things I liked actually were the books they chose. I feel like most books were pretty helpful. So we used the Chukyu Iko textbook, we used the Kanji Look and Learn textbook, Kanji 2200, Try and 3, Drill and Drill for listening and reading, and the mini story book for vocabulary. So a lot of good books, and I'm very happy that they also used a lot of different series. So I was able to try a lot of different things, and as I said in another video, I really like the Try, the mini story, and the Drill and Drill. So I want to use them as well for higher levels. But having a lot of textbooks also made things very confusing, especially having 2 textbooks for grammar, which was the Try and the Chukyu Eiko textbook. And also we had 2 teachers teaching out of the Try book on 2 different days in 2 different chapters. So we always had to think, okay, today's Monday. This sensei is teaching all the even numbers, and the other teacher is teaching the uneven numbers, so 1, 3, 5, etc. And then every chapter has 2 parts, so we would always having to think about, okay, now it's the uneven day, but are we in the first or in the second part of the chapter? And then confusion reached its biggest point 2 weeks or 3 weeks before our final exams, because we were finished with the Chukyu Eiko textbook. So now they use the Try textbook every single day, but every teacher had their own chapter. So we would be covering like on Monday chapter 11, then on Tuesday chapter 9, then we would do chapter 10:1 and then 11:2, and I will put the picture here from the schedule we got. And first it just said try, and our teacher said, yeah, you definitely have to, pre-study those grammar points or like the what we're gonna cover. And then I wrote to her, yeah, but what are we covering on which day? Which teacher is gonna cover which topic? I don't know that. And then she added all the numbers, and then we uploaded it again, and I was still, even though I had the numbers, it was confusing as. And also going through the same grammar points in the Chukyu Eiko textbook and also the Try textbook multiple times was confusing, because for example Niote or Nyoru and Yona, they were covered a lot of different times in one textbook, but then we had 2 textbooks covering them a lot of different times, and we were always like, okay, now we're talking about how you can use Niote for this particular reason. Okay, did we already had that in the other book? Wait, where did I learn that? I wanted to look up where I learned the thing I'm thinking about. Which book was it? Very confusing. And I also asked other people if they felt the same. They were like, yeah, I don't like it. Because before they had the Minano Nihongo textbooks, and they only had like the one textbook as their main textbook, and the Kanji Look and Learn textbook for the kanji. And they said it was so easy, and it was so just easy to know where you are, and everything was just, one after the other. But then they changed into chaos when we entered the N3 level, and that's when I came to the school as well, so I only know chaos. And one other thing I liked was that teachers would announce the tests at least 1 week before we would do them, so we always had enough time to prepare, and they would also put them on the schedule. So if you read the schedule carefully, because they were sometimes a bit hidden between like all the different lines, you would know when there's a test and when you have to prepare for certain things. And then one thing I really appreciated was that we would get the grade for our test either the same day or 84 hours later. Like this was usually the longest time we had to wait, and I really appreciate that because it means our teacher put in a lot of effort to check everything very quickly. I feel like in Germany sometimes you would wait 2 weeks to receive a test result. And also my class teacher taught us some helpful study strategies, for example the vocabulary mind map, which I talked about in the How the Language School Changed My Study Approach video. And coming back to my classmates, because I entered into an existing class, I was also a bit afraid that there would be already the groups formed and I would be alone. But there were people that just talked to me like right when I entered the classroom. They were like, oh, how are you? Who are you? Where you're from? What do you do? And everyone made me feel very incorporated into the class, which I also really liked. And then we come to the quality of our teachers, which was not always great. I feel like there was a big gap between teachers and also between classes, because when I talked to my boyfriend, he was in the N5 morning class. He said every time I tell him something about what happened in my class or what our teacher said, he always said that it sounds like we're going to completely different schools, because he had such a positive experience and I had such a negative experience. So I feel like this should not happen in the same school, and I feel like there should be more quality control when it comes to classes, you know, like how things are taught, how teachers behave, how teachers treat students especially. But yeah, so one of our teachers I really liked, because she put in a lot of effort to make us understand also the mini stories, and she would put the mini stories into AI and let AI create a picture that represented what the mini story was exactly about. So even if you didn't understand like every single word, you understood it through the picture. Also, when we had her as the grammar teacher, like in the last 2-3 weeks, because basically every teacher became a grammar teacher teaching the N3 book, she was the best grammar teacher, even though she taught us listening usually. And it was so helpful to just have an image in your head connected with a grammar point, which is kind of an easy thing to do. I mean, other teachers could have just Googled a picture, like a license-free picture, and put it on the slide, which would have taken 2 minutes, but a lot of teachers didn't do that, so it made studying a bit harder. One other teacher, I'm still undecided if I like her or not, to be honest. She would act out scenes sometimes for the grammar points. It was very funny. Sometimes she would run into class and do some funny things or like funny movements to explain us the meaning. This was also, of course, memorable, but at the same time, when we would do our grammar exercise sheets, she would just say "batsu" when it was wrong, and she was just cross it out and then give it back, and I would be like, yeah, but why? She would be like, yeah, you should know why. It's like, no, I don't know. I just started studying the grammar point. I don't know why this is wrong. And then there wasn't really an explanation, so I asked ChatGPT, and then I kind of knew it, and I was like, okay, so ChatGPT is more helpful than my teacher. Great. That's not why I'm paying so much money. And I'm sorry if I go back to paying so much money, but I paid a lot for the school. In Germany, tuition and schooling is free. I'm very blessed to come from a country where that is the case, but it shocks me even more than to see, if I pay a couple €1,000 for a school, how bad the quality can be sometimes. And I feel like it's not worth the money to me, because I mean, it comes from my German perspective, so don't hate me for saying that. I mean, I know if you come from America and you have to pay a lot of money for going to university. And then coming back to the teacher that didn't really explain us the grammar points, she would make us sometimes memorize the mini stories and then do a hapio in front of the class, but she only gave us like 5 or 10 minutes to memorize 5 sentences with a lot of vocabulary words we didn't know before. So of course it was very hard to memorize, and I think only one person did it completely right from the few times we had to do it. And then they would have to stand there, and even if they couldn't do it, they still had to try, and then we had to whisper them the words, but a lot of times they would misunderstand the words, and then they would say something wrong, and then it was even worse for learning, because then you would hear wrong Japanese as, you know, the people who are in the audience, and it also wasted quite some time. And I'm very happy that was only practiced in the first couple of weeks. Apparently this year was the first year where they used the mini storybook, so we were kind of like the test subjects, I guess, with that as well. And then there was another teacher I really liked, because I really liked her energy, but she would make a lot of mistakes every single lesson, and on her slides mostly the furigana would be placed in the wrong, you know, area. So they would be placed too far to the left, too far to the right, or they would be wrong, or they would be missing. You know, sometimes if you write a kanji word, there's still like hiragana next to it, like akeru or something, and sometimes the hiragana next to it would be missing, or there would be written something that's incorrect. And it was not like she would teach it to us for the first time, and she would realize that, and she would be like, oh, I'm sorry, that's my mistake. But if you hear yourself saying that every single lesson, wouldn't you then go into your slides before the next lesson and see if there's a mistake? Or if you don't see your own mistakes, ask someone else to look over it. I don't understand why it didn't change over the whole 6 months. And she also gave her contact information to all of us who are graduating now now, and she said, after you graduate, you're allowed to contact me. If we ever encounter a grammar point we don't really understand or we have trouble with, we can just write her and she will explain it to us, which is very nice, especially because she's not our teacher anymore, of course, after we graduate, but she still gave us the option to keep in touch. And she was the only teacher to do that of all our 5 teachers. So yeah, I felt like this was very nice. And she also got very emotional when we said that we were going to graduate, because she only knew about 2 people who would leave the class. And she was already kind of sad when she talked about them leaving. And then we would say, wait, there are 6 people leaving the class. And she was like, what? No, I wasn't prepared for that. I thought I would see you again for like a whole year. My heart can't handle that. But then I also felt like some teachers weren't really putting in the effort to make things interesting. Like I said, with not using pictures, for example. And some teachers would only put the example sentences from the book onto the slides, which also didn't make sense because we had the book right in front of us. So it didn't really add any value to the lesson. And then we come to the longest section in this subsection, our class teacher. I already mentioned her in my I Wanna Quit Language School video, and also in the one video about the final exams, which I posted last time. I kind of still have mixed feelings about her, even though I'm leaning onto the side of I do not like her at all. But then there are some little moments where I feel like, oh, maybe she's not that bad at all. But then there are all the moments where I'm like, oh my god, I hate her. It was very hard to decide how to view her, because she has basically 2 sides and you never know which side you're gonna get. Do you get the friendly side, which comes out maybe 10% of the time, or you're gonna get the angry, screaming side that comes out 90% of the time? When I had the talk with her in December about wanting to quit, we talked for 40 minutes and she was very, understanding about me wanting to leave, but still said I couldn't go, and that if I would decide to leave, she could not put in a good word for me at the immigration office, so that if I ever wanna have a long-term visa again, it would be probably very hard for me. Apparently, that's wrong. I still don't know if that's how it works, but a lot of people commented on my video that this is not how it works, and it was basically her persuading me to stay and using her power to, make me feel intimidated, kind of. So seeing it in that way makes me dislike her even more. She would often scold us using Japanese that was too easy for our level and said, you're not beginners anymore, you're now intermediate and you have to act like that. But then I'm like, yeah, just because our label has changed doesn't mean we know everything and we can use everything and we are perfect. So I'm sorry, but that's not how it works. You have to teach us. We never really studied speaking. We only did like shadowing. You cannot learn speaking through just shadowing. Of course, you will pick up some words or some things, maybe how to say things, but it doesn't mean now I can use all the grammatical structures that I learned in my intermediate textbook and speak perfect Japanese when I never practiced. And then she would often scold the whole class, even if it was only the fault of a few people for not turning in their homework or something like that. So we would always get a very negative vibe inside the classroom when we had her every single week. And because of that, I didn't feel like wanting to go to school on a lot of days, especially because also on Thursday she would teach in the class next to us, which was also her class. Like, she was also the class teacher for that class, and we would hear her scream every single Thursday multiple times while we had class, because of course our doors were always open while doing classes. And even if we closed the doors because we said to the teacher, I'm sorry, I can't concentrate, can you close the door, we would still hear her scream, and sometimes even hear what she screamed through the wall and the closed door, which was so stressful because I thought like, okay, I have to endure this every single Tuesday. Why do I have to be here on Thursday as well and hear her? And it was especially annoying when we had to take tests or we had to do a hapyo, like presentation, and we had to film the presentation, and you could hear the screams of the other room more in the presentation than you could hear the person who presented. So I was also very nervous when we did the oral exam at the end of the semester, because I was just like, hey, which version am I gonna get? And I got the kind of emotionless, strict version that didn't smile, that didn't say hello really or anything else. It was very pleasant. And oftentimes when you gave the wrong answer, she would either ignore you, kind of roll her eyes, or not even, look at you, because there were some people she didn't like, especially most of the guys she disliked, and some people allegedly, they felt like they were treated worse because of where they came from and also their ethnicity. I have white privilege, so I'm I'm kind of grateful for that in that situation that, you know, I feel like usually Japanese people like German people because we're also quite organized, or at least that's the image a lot of people have. So I didn't have a negative starting point, but I felt very bad for the people, you know, that were treated not well because apparently of those reasons, I don't know, sometimes when they would answer, she wouldn't even look at them. Like she would kind of sit with the back towards the whole row of people and she decided they all should sit together. So maybe she could ignore them altogether by not, you know, facing their way, I don't know. But sometimes she would not even look. They would just talk to her back and she would ignore them. And it was so uncomfortable. It's so rude. And again, that's why I was like, I felt very disrespected as an adult and also as a paying customer, if I can say so. And also a lot of other people, when I did my I Wanna Quit Language School video and I mentioned that, they were so angry as well. So I feel like I'm not the only one. She would also tell us it's forbidden to hear things the first time in class and that we are supposed to study everything before at home. I understand her intention because doing pre-study is more effective than just going to class, hear it for the first time and then do revision. But it's not realistic to expect us to prepare 3.5 hours of classes every single day before school, because to get a good understanding, we would have to put in at least 2-3 hours at least. Because she also expected us, when we studied new kanji, we studied a whole page every second day, and every page would contain 5 kanji with 15 words in total, like 15 new words. And she wanted us to know exactly in which context to use the word, because we then had to write a little sakubun as a group together using the new kanji words. And when we didn't know the exact context for the word, she would get very angry and said that we didn't put in enough effort. But I'm sorry, especially if you work, you cannot prepare every single day so many things. And even me studying, I think 3 hours a day outside of school, I couldn't do everything she wanted us to do. It was just too much. A lot of expectations she had towards us were very unrealistic. And also when we had to do our presentations, for example, she would choose topics that are way above our level. They're way too hard. Even classes that were in like the N2 level said that topic would be maybe their level or even maybe a bit too hard for them. The, you know, gender care gap in our country and problem points in the solutions. That one we had to do for our final presentation. It was just unrealistic to expect us to use all the new grammar and be perfect, have perfect intonation and things like that, even though we never studied pitch accent, but we were supposed to have perfect intonation. And then around February and March, a lot of people got sick, which makes sense because first it was very warm, then it snowed all of a sudden, and then it was kind of warm again. And a lot of people had, you know, like colds, or they were just not feeling well because of all the stress we were under. And then she said to us, like I mentioned in the last video, that if we're not able to manage our bodily states by ourselves, like if we cannot show up every single day to school, then we're not made to be international students, which is stupid to say. And she also gave our class the special rule that if we wouldn't be present on the day where we had the speaking exam or the presentation, that we would only be able to get 80% out of the full points, even though we would have been perfect at the, you know, like second possible date to do it. And other classes didn't have that. And also there were other special rules for our class, like we would never get our tests back. So other classes, they would get the sheet where they, you know, like wrote all the answers and everything was corrected. They would just get the sheet back. She would always write, if you want to see your test, you have to go to the teacher's office and then you have to go to her. She has to show you the page, but you cannot have it. And me, trying to avoid all the negative things, I never went. I mostly was very good at the tests, but it kind of backfired because in the final exam, she asked some things again that I knew I had wrong. And then I kind of made the same mistake again, which was of course also kind of my fault for not going to her and looking at the test. But I still feel like it's so stupid. Why wouldn't you just give the paper back? Like, why do you have to make it so complicated? And I feel like the worst thing about that was other teachers knew what was going on. They knew how we got treated. They knew that, you know, all the uncomfortable situations we were in, and they would make jokes about that. So one of our teachers would say like, oh, but you don't want me to tell your teacher about it, do you? So do what I said to you. And having someone like grin in your face and being like, oh, I will tell your homeroom teacher if you don't behave. They knew what would follow as the consequence was kind of disgusting. And also some teachers from the morning class, they would say like, oh, the kawaii teacher, you know, like the scary teacher. So everyone kind of knew what was going on and no one helped us. Like no one, at least from what I witnessed, no one stepped in and said, I'm sorry, that's not how you should treat your students, or like they don't deserve to be treated like that. And I also complained to the English staff support, and she said she would, you know, like give a notice to the principal apparently. And then I talked to my classmates and they were like, that's not gonna happen, because they complained a lot of times before I even entered the school. And one person even tried to personally talk to the principal, and he would just be blocked off by other people, like other staff, who would be like, no, I'm gonna tell it to him. And they never probably said anything because nothing changed, or maybe they said something, but in the end nothing changed. It felt like no matter what we did, no matter if we tried to, you know, get out of class by changing to another class, we would just be kept in the class. There was no way to escape the class except for leaving the school. And also some of the classmates that are still in school next semester, they also said, if I have her again, I want to quit. And also other students who didn't have her as a teacher but experienced her, you know, screaming at people from our class in the hallway in front of all the other students, which is very unprofessional. They said if they would get her as a class teacher, they would leave. They would immediately change out of the class, or like try to change out of the class, or like quit school altogether. And it's the first year, like now the first year's over, that the teacher is in the school. And I feel like it's so sad because, you know, there are of course some not so great things about the school, but minor things. And I feel like having another teacher, we could have had a very good experience, and it could have been fun, and it could have been, you know, not so stressful. It wouldn't have taken such a toll on people's mental health, me included. And especially I'm so sad for the young people in my class. As I told you, there were like 17 and 18-year-olds in my class, and thinking about how I was at their age and how many things I kind of, sorry, getting emotional. I kind of feel sorry for them, like having to experience someone treating them like that. Yeah, didn't expect that I would cry in this video, but yeah, having someone treat you like that can really alter your, like, the image you have about yourself. I just hope they don't take it, you know, too personally, that they will not be negatively influenced by that for the rest of their life. Even me being 27, I kind of took a lot of things to heart, I feel like, even though I shouldn't do, because I'm a very good student. Now at least. And I had very good grades, I tried my best, but still I felt like it wasn't good enough. And it showed me also again that I need to work on not wanting to, you know, meet everyone's expectations of me, or like the standards people put on me, and that I should only try to make myself proud. So it was a very good lesson to be there, but of course I wouldn't wish it to anyone else to experience, you know, such high levels of stress for half a year. So I hope if you enter the school, you will have another teacher, and maybe ask around for the teacher, and you will know, everyone will tell you the name immediately because everyone knows. So now that I calmed down a bit, let's continue. There was also one thing I didn't really like in general, and also my boyfriend said the same to me. Usually there wasn't a lot of praise that we would get as students. There was mostly critique. Like if we did things well, it would be mostly not acknowledged. And of course, if you did something negative, then it would be scolded. But I feel like, of course, critique is important, but it's also important to say, hey, you did great. I'm happy you improved or something. First, when I entered school and we got our test grades back, we got them through Google Chat. And then when I improved, I think once or twice my teacher wrote to me, oh, I'm happy you had all the grammar correct in the test. Or like, oh, congratulations on getting full points on the kanji test. And I was really happy about that, you know, to get positive feedback. But then I think like after 2 months, maybe from January on, they would just give us the grades through Google Classroom, and we would just see the points. There was no comment, no nothing. It was a bit sad because, of course, I'm doing it for myself, but still, I feel like it's only human to want to be praised if you get full points on a test. We wouldn't get that anymore. And also for our final presentation, even though some people were very good, we just got a big critique at the end, and there was no, oh, I'm very happy that a lot of people put in so much effort to make their slides look super pretty, and some people had a very good presentation, but this and this was bad. I mean, this would have been okay, more helpful, but just, you know, being screamed at again and only criticized made it feel like no matter what you do, again, it's not good enough. And also, in general, classes were sometimes very dry, especially in the first quarter when they focused more on the JLPT. I often had the feeling they would just try to push as much information as possible down our throats, and sometimes there wasn't even time to clarify the questions because we were just too short on time. And then when it comes to grammar teachings, they would usually just make us read the book, and then we did the exercises and checked if we had the right answers. But then there was no real time to explain why the answer was correct, why the other answer wasn't really correct. So I found ChatGPT more helpful and asking questions like, oh, why do I use that grammar point and not that? What's the difference between those two grammar points? You know, those are the deeper things I want to learn in class. I want to learn in class what's the difference to what we've learned before. But they wouldn't teach us more nuanced things or compare things to each other, except for once or like twice where they were like, oh, seide is the opposite of okagede. And that was it. I feel like because of that, I just could have studied what we studied in class all by myself, and I would have had similar results except for listening, because I had to listen to a lot of Japanese. And in general, especially the first quarter, I felt like the school focuses way too much on the JLPT, and they would make people take the JLPT, and they had to pay for it, of course. The people had to pay for their own JLPT application and stuff, and half of the class failed, which makes sense if you only studied N3 material for 2 months and you didn't even cover a third of the things you should know. They also made us take the JLPT trial exam, kind of, on the first week of school, and of course everyone failed, and I was like, what's the point? Are you just gonna demonstrate to us how stupid we are? Or what do you wanna tell us with that? And then we took them 2 more times further down the road, which was nice because then I passed 2 times. So then I felt like, okay, if I would take the JLPT, I would probably pass. Not very good, but I would pass. So it was kind of good to see where I stand. But I came to Japanese language school because I really wanted to understand Japanese, and not just, you know, get things pushed down my throat for the JLPT. I was a bit disappointed by that. The open doors during teaching was very annoying, and especially also during the tests. Then, as I told you, when we went to the museum, we had to teach the lower classes. And outside of that, we had to teach lower classes 3 times. And I did not pay. I'm sorry if I go back to the money thing, but I did not pay to be here, to attend language school, to teach to other people. So we had to teach them how to do a presentation. We had to teach them how to write a text. And yeah, then the museum. Also, a lot of times on the day where we had to study grammar, first person out of the row who completed the grammar sheet and, you know, let the sensei correct the answers, they would be made into the row teacher. So usually it was me or the person who sat behind me, was also very good in class. And then everyone who had a question had to come to us instead of the teacher. And I was just like, I guessed on some of these answers. I cannot tell you why it's correct. I'm sorry. I do not want to teach you anything that's wrong. I don't want to teach in general. If I have more time, I want to review something or use my time in class effectively. Also, there was, like I said, the exercise with the group where we had to write as a group a little story with using the kanji words we learned from the current page we were on. And then there was always one responsible person that was the sensei of the group. And for the first couple of weeks, it was me in my group, and the sensei was not allowed to write. So I had to sit there. Technically, I had to sit there, watch them write, and then correct what they wrote. So I wouldn't have the chance to write, but I wanted to learn how to write as well. So I felt like this was again a waste of my time, kind of, just having to sit there. So actually, I also participated in writing, and I told them, well, what you want to write, that doesn't make a lot of sense. We have to connect that to the meaning of the other sentence. So I kind of still tried to keep my sensei role, but I also wanted to write. Then again, like every time we had a group work, usually there were always the same people, including me, who were made responsible for the group. So it was always like, yeah, Celine's group and Baba's group. And it was always on us to make sure everything is good. And it put so much pressure, especially on like a group presentation, also on me, because I was like, okay, I wrote 5,000 times into the line group. They should submit their stuff. They didn't do it. Is it now my fault? Will I get scolded for them not doing stuff? I didn't like that. Like, why cannot everyone be responsible for their own things, or everyone responsible for the group work? You know, why does it have to be me being the responsible person just because I'm a good student? So this video is so long already, I'm sorry, but now let's go on to the things I heard from other students. So as I told you, I made a Google Sheet where I asked questions to a lot of people, and now let's see actually what they answered. So the first question that I asked was, are you attending morning or afternoon class? Because I felt like it was important because, you know, as I said, afternoon class people had a different experience mostly. So we have 6 people from the afternoon class and 5 people from the morning class because 11 people took part in the survey. And then I asked, what's the thing you like most about language school? And people said classmates, our friends in A4 class, so my class, the method of education, friend, good teacher, both students and teachers are open-minded and creative. We have the opportunity to meet new people from other countries and make a bond of friendship with them. The lessons are only in Japanese and the classes are international. Most senseis are cool, especially some old sensei, just like our sweet grandma. That's true. We had some senseis who were kind of like the sweet grandma, which was very cute. I like that we focus on writing essays. I used to struggle with writing sentences. Sensei. I didn't have her, so I can't say anything. The people are nice. And then, what do you dislike most about language school? Maybe the teacher, especially. I feel like I should blur out the name. It's our class teacher. Kanji study is slow. Test, no dislike point. Small common areas. The way of teaching, reacting and acting that some of the teachers have are not professional. Treating the students like they were from elementary school. The activities that they carry are not fun and they manage to make every trip and activity really feel tedious instead of relaxing or rewarding. I feel like this was someone from my class. I agree, 100%. The program moves too fast and there's no time to have things explained again. Also agree. Sometimes they demand you to do paperwork in details to the point it even touches your personal life. I think they maybe talk about the essays and stuff, but I told you before that you have to write about private things and then they will blast it to the class. I don't like how they didn't pay attention to us. That's also what I heard from other people in the morning class who said sometimes they didn't understand things, especially because they were new to Japanese and they would ask and the teachers were like, no, we don't have time. Shoganai, we have to go on to the next thing, which is not very good because if you don't teach the basics correctly or like in detail, how are you supposed to learn the more complicated stuff? The cafeteria doesn't have enough tables. Yeah. Main teacher, would you recommend language school to someone else? And 5 people said no and 6 people said yes. I'm sorry, it probably doesn't really help you. But again, there are also people who would recommend my school, as I told you before. Like, there are people who had a very good experience in my school, not just people like me or our class who had a bad experience. And then I also asked, if you clicked no, why wouldn't you recommend our school to someone else? The class classify is not clearly good enough. It's again what I told you. They didn't put people inside a class that fits their level. The second one is that the name of the school is design, but we didn't get or access the design things in school that much, so it's just advertisement for me. I would kind of agree to an extent. The school just tells you to study by yourself at home before classes, so it gives the feeling that coming to school is something completely unnecessary and they don't do more than just read the book out loud, something that we could easily do at home by ourselves. Also, they keep treating the students as people who don't know what they are doing and keep scolding them with almost no reason. Yeah, 100%, I agree. I felt like, like with having to study everything at home before and coming to school and just asking you questions, I just felt like, I'm sorry, but I didn't pay 3,000 something euros for a Q&A session. If you're a fast learner, it's fine. Otherwise, you risk falling behind. Moreover, privacy is not always respected. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend the school. It's a waste of time and it's better to improve. I think they mean by myself. The pace, the way people are sorted, I guess they mean into classes, maybe? Or maybe they mean into good and bad students. The way we are treated, like we don't have a choice. And then I also included an optional question. If you could change something about our school, what would it be? First thing is our sensei A4 class. More exercises on kanji and grammar. Put more tables in the cafeteria. The way of teaching is the main problem, so I would change the teachers. Okay, and their way of doing their job when it comes to deal with students. Hopefully treating them as proper students or even adults instead of 6 or 10-year-old kids. I would avoid doing useless activities which are more suitable for children and increase the speaking practice. I would also have a slightly slower program. Also agree. I don't want to participate in any activities because they're boring. No one actively participates and it takes too much time to complete one activity. Why do we have to free up our time to take the exam? More tables, as I told you also before. It should be more focused on living the language you're learning and focusing on applying what we're learning to real life, not just going over grammar points. We are living in Japan to learn Japanese, not to take the JLPT. Oh, this could have been written by me. So yeah, a lot of what other students said reflects my own opinion. So I feel also a bit validated in my, more negative experience and also opinion. So I hope it was interesting to you to hear also what other people had to say. Let's get on to the next point. This video is too long, but I don't care at this point. How did my skills improve? So the first 2 to 3 months, I felt like my skills didn't really improve and I was very dissatisfied with the progress, since most of the things we learned I already did at home. But then I also felt like it was kind of good going over things again. I was still getting used to, living in Japan, navigating, all the just daily life things, like where to get my groceries and stuff, and, how to get around. I mean, I've been to Japan before, but I've never lived here, so it's something different, I feel like, than living in a hotel. And also just getting used to how classes work in the first few weeks. It was good that not everything was new, but after getting used to it, like after the first 2 or 3 weeks, I felt frustrated because only the vocabulary was new and I knew all the kanji, I knew 90% of the grammar. I felt like the texts in the Chukyu Eiko textbook were way too simple and I was like, oh, that's easy. Why am I here? I don't know why I got sorted into that class. I guess I was jet lagged when I did the entrance exam, so maybe I didn't do the best job. And then after winter break, the situation kind of improved and we also covered a few new grammar points that I didn't know. So I was happy to learn new things as well. And I feel like the thing that improved the most was grammar and listening, because of course I had to listen to Japanese 3.5 hours a day. And first I had so much trouble understanding what the teacher said, but now I can understand like 98%, I would say, of what they're saying. And I can also more easily understand what people on the street are saying. Like if I eavesdrop, and I kind of get the gist of what they're talking about, which is nice. It's a bit easier now to also understand faster Japanese. Also grammar, because of course I had to relearn a lot of the grammar points I studied at home. It was still good to get them more cemented into my brain and to have better foundation. So it was still kind of a good thing. I just expected, to be a bit further by now. And then speaking, I didn't really improve, I think. But then again, I don't know if that's really the case, because it's the same when your looks change. You see yourself every day in the mirror, so you don't really notice. But people who didn't see you for 6 months, they notice you changed. So when I think about before coming here, I couldn't talk to, the store assistant or something. I can do that now, but that's actually something I taught myself. Like now I have my standard phrases in my head that I can use, and usually that's enough to get my point across. When it comes to casual speaking, I feel like I was always scared, but now I'm even more scared to talk to teachers because of my class teacher, and I do not want to talk to teachers ever again. I also had the period where I was like, I don't want to do italki as well. I never want to talk to anyone in Japanese. But then I had like still 3 lessons with my italki teacher that were expiring because I didn't use them for half a year. So I didn't want to waste the money. So I was like, okay, it's at least a practice, for the speaking exam coming up. And I enjoyed it so much. Like it was so nice to talk to a generally friendly person in Japanese. And also I felt like I was able to say more. I still had to think a lot like before, but I was able to say a few more things and use a couple of grammar points that I had never used before in conversation with her. So I feel like it kind of improved. But again, I thought I would be way better, but yeah, of course, since we didn't do practice, how should I improve? Like if I don't have time outside of school because of work and as well to interact with a lot of Japanese people, and also the people in my house don't really want to talk, it's hard to increase your level. But I also hear it from other people going to Japanese language school that there are a lot of schools who don't put emphasis on speaking, which I do not understand, especially if you come to Japanese language school, because of course people say they want to pass the N2, but they want to pass the N2 because they want to get a job or they want to get into university, and then they have to talk a lot. So it doesn't make sense to not study that or like practice that. But okay. And then I don't really think my kanji knowledge improved at all. I just feel like I'm comfortable with seeing more kanji. It's not an overwhelming feeling, even if I can't read them. And when I see my reading ability, of course kanji are also related to reading, going into Book Off for the first time, I was so overwhelmed. I was just like, oh my god, how should I find the book that I'm looking for with all the Japanese that I can't read? Oh my god, I have no idea. But now, if I go to a bookstore and I see the cover and I can mostly read the title, or at least know what the book is kind of about, it just feels so good. And it really fills my heart because I love books, I love reading. So even though it didn't improve too much, feel like it improved a bit. And also, before I went to language school, I read the series Oji-sama to Neko, and I have some of the manga volumes with me here because I bought them in Japan. And comparing how fast I was reading it in Germany and how fast I can read them now, I definitely improved my reading speed. I feel like it's also, again, being used to seeing more Japanese every single day for a couple of hours a day helped to get the general idea, even if I don't understand or if I don't know the vocabulary words. If I can see the kanji, I kind of get what the word is trying to say. For example, there was the word for learned helplessness in the book I'm currently reading, and I even just learned the word in English through a friend here in Japan a couple of months ago, and I looked at the kanji and I was like, does this mean learned helplessness? And it actually meant learned helplessness. I was so happy about that. I was so proud. And I feel like if I didn't go to school here, it would have taken a lot more time, because here sometimes I had like 7 hours of Japanese exposure a day, and I don't think I would have pushed so much at home. Maybe like 3 hours or 4 hours at the most. So am I happy with my results? Kind of. As I said, I thought I would be, you know, completely finished with N3. Well, like, at least that's what I hoped. And I would say now I'm kind of on the high N3 level, but there's still quite a lot of kanji from the N3 level I don't know because they didn't get taught to us. There are a lot of vocabulary words that I still don't know from the N3 level. I kind of know all the grammar points, which is nice. Also, listening and reading is kind of okay, except for some of the vocabulary words. I would have hoped I could just, you know, start N2 when I go back, but no, I will still, at least this year, spend my time on the N3 level. Editing Celine here, I feel like I explained something not very well when it comes to the level and my dissatisfaction. So as I told you, the level I got placed in was too low for my level. At least that's what I felt like for the first 4 months. And then when I wanted to quit school, because I told my teacher I don't feel like I'm gonna achieve my goals here, and I heard from people that you cannot really change class after the Nyugachiki, so the entrance ceremony. And then my teacher promised me that we're gonna use the Tobida book soon, and it's a bridge between N3 and N2. So I was very happy to hear that, and I really wanted to use it. I looked into the book, you know, I watched Arino Yume's review video, and I was so excited to use it. And then it never got mentioned again. And I asked by the start of February, like, where's the book? When are we supposed to start it? And then she said, well, she talked to other teachers, and a lot of people don't seem ready yet from our class, so they will not start it. And I felt kind of betrayed, because if I would have known that in December that it was basically not necessarily a lie, but you know, then I would have advocated more for being switched to a higher class. But since I thought we're gonna cover higher level material, I didn't change the class. So I also feel like this added to my frustration, because I do not need to take the JLPT anytime soon, and I don't need it for anything, so I don't want to stress myself out just because my teacher wants me to take the JLPT. When I told her that I will maybe take it next year, because I also want my boyfriend to take his next level and he still has to learn quite a lot for, you know, N4. She was like, if you're gonna take the JLPT next year, you can take N2. No, leave me alone. Don't put more stress on me, please. So, would I recommend the school? To be honest, it's a very hard question that I cannot answer for you. You can just answer that for yourself, hearing everything I said and also the opinions of other people. If you're okay with the things I said, and even if you go to the school, it doesn't mean you have the same experience. Maybe you get into morning class or another afternoon class with another class teacher and everything is fine and everything is, you know, butterflies and rainbows. Then I feel like it would be kind of a good school to visit. But if you have the same experience as me, I wouldn't wish that to you, I feel like. So maybe consider if you can also live with the negative points when you're making your choice. Like, in the end, I can just say I'm very happy I went to Japanese language school. I'm very happy that I met all my classmates and they're such nice people, and I'm so sad that I will not be able to see them again, or like I will not see everyone again. But you know, thinking about not having, you know, the whole class setting once more, it's very sad, and now I'm getting emotional again. So I've been recording for 2 hours. Let's see how far I can edit the video down. It's probably still very long, so thank you for sticking around for so long, but I just wanted to cover everything in as much detail as possible, and I still feel like I forgot maybe a couple of negative things. But I feel like I said enough negative things, so the next video will be more positive. And I'm very happy that now, you know, all the stress is falling off, and also my body is feeling better again. Like when you watched the last video, you would know I had some like health struggles also because of all the stress. So yeah, now everything is nice and I'm looking forward to picking my mom up from the airport today and then, you know, exploring Japan with her. The next video I will post is probably a reading vlog. I will also share my experience on reading my first book without furigana. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure to subscribe and also give this video a thumbs up. And I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye bye!